Your great-grandfather's homestead wasn't just about annual crops. It was about planting once and harvesting for decades. Because, believe it or not, there are 20 perennial food plants that once fed American families year after year, but are now completely banned from your property. Some will shock you, others might be thriving in abandoned lots near you without anyone knowing the legal danger. The reasons why might change how you think about sustainable gardening forever. Number 20, hydrilla. This underwater plant with delicate whorled leaves was once sold in aquarium stores and used in water gardens for its attractive appearance. In some traditional cuisines, the tender growing tips are harvested like watercress. It seemed like the perfect aquatic plant, attractive, fast-growing, and providing oxygen to water while requiring no annual replanting. But hydrilla earned the nickname the perfect aquatic weed for good reason. It grows so densely that it blocks boat propellers, clogs water intake pipes, and creates stagnant conditions that kill fish. A single plant fragment can establish a new colony, and it spreads rapidly through waterways. Hydrilla is now on the federal noxious weed list, making it illegal to possess, transport, or sell in most states, with fines up to $10,000 for violations. This perennial aquatic dream became an aquatic nightmare that costs billions in control efforts. Number 19, kudzu. Kudzu was hailed as the miracle perennial that would save American agriculture during the Great Depression and Dust Bowl. This vigorous vine could prevent soil erosion, provide livestock feed, and even feed families during hard times, all while coming back year after year without replanting. The leaves are rich in protein and can be cooked like spinach. The flowers can be made into jelly, and the massive roots can be processed into flour. The government actually paid farmers to plant it, distributing over 85 million seedlings across the Southeast. But kudzu had conquest in mind, not cooperation. This wonder plant grows up to a foot per day, smothering everything in its path: trees, buildings, power lines, and entire landscapes. It now covers over 7 million acres across the South and continues spreading at 150,000 acres per year. Kudzu is now banned or regulated as a noxious weed in most southern and eastern states. The perennial miracle became the vine that ate the South. Number 18, Japanese knotweed. Japanese knotweed was the exotic showpiece of Victorian American gardens, prized for its bamboo-like appearance and ability to quickly establish permanent colonies. The young shoots are actually quite tasty. They have a tart, lemony flavor similar to rhubarb and are considered a delicacy in Japan. These hollow shoots emerge each spring from massive underground root systems, and they can be pickled, stir-fried, or added to soups. But Japanese knotweed earned the terrifying nickname, the most invasive plant in the world. Once established, its rhizomes burrow 10 feet deep and spread 60 feet horizontally, cracking foundations, destroying driveways, and overwhelming native plants with unstoppable force. A single fragment can start a new colony, making it nearly impossible to eliminate. Property owners have faced lawsuits for letting it spread to neighboring land, and it's now listed on noxious weed lists in most states. The exotic perennial showpiece became a property-destroying monster. Number 17, purple leucostrife. Purple loosestrife was the showstopper of American water gardens throughout the 20th century, beloved for its tall spikes of brilliant purple flowers that returned faithfully each year. This European perennial brought stunning color to pond edges and marshy areas where few other flowers would bloom. The young leaves are actually edible when cooked and were used as a pot herb in traditional European cuisine, similar to spinach or chard. But purple leucostrife had wetland domination programmed into its DNA. A single plant produces up to 2.7 million seeds per year, and it forms dense stands that crowd out cattails, sedges, and other native wetland plants that waterfowl depend on for survival. By the 1990s, it had invaded over 190,000 acres of wetlands across 48 states. The plant is now banned for sale and distribution in most states, with control efforts costing taxpayers over $45 million annually. The purple perennial beauty became an ecological disaster, destroying America's wetland ecosystems. Number 16. Eurasian water milfoil. Eurasian water milfoil was once prized by aquarium enthusiasts and water gardeners for its feathery underwater foliage that provided perfect habitat for fish and added oxygen to water year after year. This aquatic perennial seemed ideal for permanent water features. Once established, it would return each season without replanting. In some traditional cuisines, the tender-growing tips are harvested as aquatic vegetables with a mild, slightly sweet flavor. But Eurasian water milfoil proved to be one of the most aggressive aquatic invaders in North America. It forms dense underwater mats that interfere with swimming, boating, and fishing, while crowding out native aquatic plants. The plant spreads through fragmentation, meaning any piece that breaks off can start a new colony. It's now widely listed on invasive species watch lists and restricted in many states, with control efforts costing millions annually. The perfect perennial water plant became an aquatic menace that destroys lake ecosystems. Number 15. Water hyacinth. Water hyacinth was once called the most beautiful aquatic plant in the world and was featured at the 1884 World's Fair in New Orleans, where visitors were given free plants to take home. This floating perennial produces stunning purple flowers and seemed like the perfect ornamental for water gardens. It required no soil, no annual replanting, and no care, while producing gorgeous blooms year after year. The thick, spongy leaf stalks are actually edible in some Asian cuisines. But water hyacinth became America's worst aquatic weed disaster. It's one of the fastest growing plants on Earth, capable of doubling its population every 6 to 18 days, and it forms dense mats that clog waterways, block boat traffic, and kill fish by depleting oxygen levels. In Florida alone, it covers over 200,000 acres and costs taxpayers over $100 million annually in control efforts. It's now regulated under federal and state lists, with fines ranging from $500 to $10,000 for possession. The world's most beautiful perennial aquatic plant became an aquatic nightmare. Number 14. Leafy spurge. Leafy spurge was once valued by some herbalists for its medicinal properties, and European settlers brought it to America, where it quickly established permanent colonies across the northern Great Plains. This rhizomatous perennial seemed like a hardy addition to prairie homesteads. Once planted, it would return year after year, surviving droughts and harsh winters that killed annual crops. But leafy spurge became one of the most destructive rangeland weeds in American history. It spreads through an extensive underground root system that can extend 15 feet deep and 30 feet wide, and it produces chemicals that poison the soil for other plants. A single plant can produce up to 140,000 seeds, and it now infests over 5 million acres of rangeland. The plant is toxic to most livestock and crowds out native grasses that cattle depend on for forage. It's listed as noxious in many states, with landowners required to control it at costs ranging from $100 to $300 per acre. The hardy perennial became a rangeland destroyer that costs ranchers millions annually. Number 13. Canada thistle. Canada thistle was brought to America by European colonists who valued it as a perennial food source. The young leaves can be eaten like spinach when cooked, and the flower heads can be prepared similar to artichokes. This hardy perennial seemed like a valuable addition to colonial gardens because it would return year after year, providing reliable food even in poor soils and harsh conditions. But Canada thistle became one of America's most persistent agricultural weeds. It spreads through an extensive underground root system that can regenerate from small fragments, making it nearly impossible to eliminate once established. The plant forms dense colonies that crowd out crops and native plants, and its deep roots compete aggressively for water and nutrients. It's now commonly listed as noxious in most states, with sale and transport restricted and control measures required by law. Farmers spend millions annually trying to control this perennial pest that can reduce crop yields by up to 60%. The colonial food source became agriculture's most persistent enemy. Number 12. Japanese barberry. Japanese barberry was the backbone of American suburban landscaping for decades, planted extensively because it was a virtually indestructible perennial shrub that provided year-round structure and seasonal color. The small red berries are technically edible and were sometimes used in traditional Asian medicine, though they're quite tart. Landscape architects loved this perennial because once established, it required no annual replanting and could survive neglect, drought, and harsh winters. But Japanese barberry became a public health menace when researchers discovered it creates perfect habitat for black-legged ticks that carry Lyme disease. Studies show that areas with barberry have up to 12 times more infected ticks than areas with native plants. The shrub also invades forests where it crowds out native understory plants. It's now banned or discouraged in several states, with Connecticut, Massachusetts, Maine, and New York prohibiting its sale. The perfect perennial landscape plant became a public health threat that's literally making Americans sick. Number 11. Scotch broom. Scotch broom was brought to America by European settlers who valued it as a hardy perennial shrub that could provide multiple uses. The flexible branches were used for making brooms, the flowers were sometimes used medicinally, and the plant could stabilize soil on steep slopes. This leguminous perennial seemed perfect for difficult sites because it could fix nitrogen in poor soils and would return year after year without replanting. But Scotch broom became an ecological disaster that transforms entire landscapes. It crowds out native plants, increases fire risk with its dry, flammable branches, and forms dense stands that provide poor habitat for wildlife. The plant produces thousands of seeds that can remain viable in the soil for decades. It's now regulated or forbidden to sell in California, Oregon, and Washington, with some counties spending over $500,000 annually on control efforts. The useful perennial became an ecological nightmare that's transforming Western landscapes. Number 10. Giant reed, arundo. Giant reed was initially planted along waterways in the American Southwest as a perennial solution for erosion control and windbreaks. This massive grass can grow up to 20 feet tall and seemed perfect for permanent installations that would return year after year without replanting. In some cultures, the young shoots are edible when properly prepared, and the mature canes were used for construction and crafts. But giant reed became one of the most destructive invasive plants in riparian areas across the West. It forms dense stands that crowd out native vegetation, alter water flow patterns, and increase fire risk. The plant spreads through underground rhizomes and can quickly dominate entire watersheds. It's now listed and controlled in many Western states, with removal costs ranging from $500 to $2,000 per acre. Some watersheds spend millions annually trying to control this perennial invader. The permanent erosion solution became a permanent ecological problem. Number 9. Miramar weed, Hygrophila. Miramar weed was introduced to American aquariums and water gardens as an attractive perennial aquatic plant that would provide permanent underwater landscaping. This tropical plant produces small purple flowers above water and seemed ideal for year-round water features in warmer climates. In some traditional cuisines, The leaves and stems are used as aquatic vegetables, prepared similar to other leafy greens. But Miramar weed proved to be an aggressive aquatic invader that can quickly take over entire water systems. It reproduces both by seeds and vegetatively, and even small fragments can establish new colonies. The plant forms dense mats that block sunlight, deplete oxygen, and crowd out native aquatic vegetation. It's now listed on federal aquatic weed regulations and banned in many states, with possession carrying fines up to $5,000. The permanent aquatic landscaping plant became an aquatic destroyer that threatens native ecosystems. Number 8. Multiflora rose. Multiflora rose was promoted by the USDA as the perfect perennial living fence for American farms from the 1930s through the 1960s. The government distributed over 46 million plants to farmers, promoting it as a permanent solution for livestock control that would also provide wildlife habitat and erosion control. The small red rose hips are packed with vitamin C and were sometimes used for jellies and teas, especially during World War II when citrus was scarce. But multiflora rose had conquest on its mind. It forms massive thickets with canes growing 15 feet long, creating barriers that are impossible for humans or large animals to penetrate. A single plant can produce up to 500,000 seeds annually, and birds spread them across vast distances. It now infests over 45 million acres across 35 states. It's classified as a noxious weed in 13 states, with removal costs ranging from $200 to $2,000 per acre. The government's permanent living fence became a permanent ecological nightmare. Number 7. Tree of Heaven. Tree of Heaven was once welcomed in American cities as a fast-growing perennial tree that could provide permanent shade in harsh urban conditions. This Chinese import could survive air pollution, poor soil, and neglect while growing rapidly to provide the green canopy that city planners desperately wanted. In traditional Chinese medicine, parts of the tree were used for various ailments, but Tree of Heaven became an urban and ecological nightmare. It spreads through root suckers and wind-dispersed seeds, with a single tree producing up to 325,000 seeds annually. The roots release chemicals that inhibit other plants, and they're strong enough to crack building foundations. Worse yet, it serves as the preferred host for the spotted lanternfly, an invasive pest that has caused over $50 million in agricultural damage. Many states now require immediate removal and reporting of Tree of Heaven sightings, with Pennsylvania imposing fines up to $20,000 for failure to remove it. The permanent urban solution became a permanent urban problem. Number 6. Autumn olive. Autumn olive was heavily promoted by government agencies as the perfect perennial conservation plant from the 1950s through the 1980s. The USDA distributed over 45 million seedlings, promoting it as a permanent solution for soil conservation and wildlife habitat that would provide benefits for decades without replanting. The small speckled red berries are not only edible, but surprisingly nutritious, containing more lycopene than tomatoes and high levels of vitamins and antioxidants. But this beneficial perennial had other plans. Autumn olive spreads like wildfire, with birds carrying its seeds far and wide to establish new colonies. It forms dense thickets that crowd out native plants and alter soil chemistry. What was once planted for permanent conservation became an invasive nightmare requiring expensive control efforts. It's now banned in many states, with removal costs ranging from $300 to $2,000 per acre. The permanent conservation solution became a permanent ecological disaster. Number 5. Wild parsnip. Wild parsnip was once valued as a hardy perennial root vegetable that would return year after year in abandoned fields and along roadsides, providing free food for anyone who knew how to identify and prepare it properly. European settlers brought it to America, where it quickly naturalized, and the roots are similar to cultivated parsnips, but smaller and more fibrous. This perennial seemed like a valuable survival food because once established, it would continue producing edible roots annually without cultivation. But wild parsnip became a public health menace when people discovered that the sap causes severe burns when exposed to sunlight. The plant contains photosensitizing compounds similar to giant hogweed, and contact with the sap followed by sun exposure can cause blistering and permanent scarring. Many states now classify wild parsnip as a noxious weed and require its removal from public areas. The free perennial root vegetable became too dangerous to touch, let alone eat. Number 4. Wild fennel. Wild fennel escaped from colonial gardens and naturalized across much of America, especially in California, where it grows as a perennial along roadsides and in abandoned lots. The feathery leaves, seeds, and bulbous stems are all edible and have an intense licorice flavor that was prized for both cooking and medicine. Italian and Greek immigrants especially valued this naturalized perennial, using it in traditional dishes that connected them to their homeland. But wild fennel became an agricultural enemy when it began invading rangelands and crowding out native plants that livestock depend on for forage. The plant also contains compounds that can be toxic to livestock in large quantities, and it's extremely difficult to control once established. California now classifies wild fennel as a noxious weed in some counties, and land managers spend millions trying to control this persistent perennial. The escaped perennial herb became an invasive threat to western rangelands. Number 3. Giant salvinia. Giant salvinia was introduced to American water gardens as an attractive perennial aquatic fern that would provide permanent floating coverage for ponds and water features. This tropical plant seemed perfect for year-round water landscaping. Once established, it would continue growing and reproducing without annual replacement. In some cultures, the young fronds are harvested and eaten as an aquatic vegetable, prepared similar to other leafy greens. But giant salvinia became the fastest-spreading aquatic weed in American history. Under ideal conditions, it can double its biomass every 2 to 3 days, and a single introduction can cover an entire lake within months. It forms mats up to 3 feet thick that completely cover water surfaces, blocking sunlight and depleting oxygen until everything underneath dies. The plant has no natural predators in North America, making it virtually unstoppable once established. It's now on the federal noxious weed list, with possession carrying fines up to $10,000 in most states. This innocent-looking perennial aquatic plant became an aquatic apocalypse that can destroy entire lake ecosystems. Number 2. Oriental bittersweet. Oriental bittersweet was imported in the 1860s as an ornamental perennial vine that would provide permanent coverage and spectacular fall color year after year. This vigorous climber produced abundant clusters of orange and red berries that lasted through winter, making it incredibly popular for holiday decorating and dried flower arrangements. The berries were sometimes used in traditional medicine, and the vine seemed perfect for permanent landscape installations. But Oriental bittersweet became one of the most destructive forest invaders in North America. It grows so vigorously that it can reach 60 feet into tree canopies, where its weight breaks branches and girdles trunks, killing mature trees. A single vine can produce up to 100,000 seeds, and it now infests forests across 35 states, causing an estimated $4.2 billion in ecological damage annually. It's banned for sale in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and New Hampshire, with fines up to $25,000 for commercial sales. the permanent ornamental vine became a permanent forest destroyer. Number 1. American groundnut. American groundnut was the ultimate perennial survival food of Native Americans and early colonists, a climbing vine that produced protein-rich tubers underground while its beans provided additional nutrition above ground. This native legume was so valuable that some historians believe it could have sustained the Pilgrims if they had learned to cultivate it properly. The tubers can be eaten like potatoes and are incredibly nutritious, while the beans are high in protein. As forests were cleared and wetlands drained, the specific conditions that groundnut required disappeared. The plant also became associated with primitive food gathering rather than civilized agriculture, and it was actively discouraged by agricultural extension agents who promoted annual crops instead. Today, wild groundnut populations are severely reduced, and it's protected in some states where harvesting is restricted or prohibited. The ultimate perennial survival food became too rare and forgotten to sustain anyone. These 20 banned perennials tell the story of how America lost its connection to plants that could feed families for generations. Hit that subscribe button to discover more forgotten secrets from America's perennial past, and check out the next video on your screen about the legal perennial foods that can still feed your family for decades.